Welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brut. It's a pleasure to be here with you. This is my second episode in a row. For those watching and keeping score, I don't have a tie. We should have made it a chazaka. Rabbi Brut has lots of interesting information to share today in episode 3 of season 3 on the Sefer of Chaim Kuntrus. We once again thank our anonymous sponsor who is dedicating this whole season, L'zeich Nishmas, Ramosha Chaim and Yitzchak David. All the knowledge and learning should be an Elul for his neshama. And any questions, comments, suggestions, dedication opportunities, please reach out to myself or Eliezer Brut, shweidm@ou.org or eliezerbrat@gmail.com. We will respond in kind. Rabbi Brut, what do you have to share with us today?
Well, we'll see if we have anything of interest. Mirz Hashem, I hope it will be. And let us begin over here. Okay, so we last time we were talking about Mesuzahs, mostly about Mesuzahs, Mezuzah and Chedushim relating to Minhag of the Chazon Ish, Chaim Kuntrus, in actual practice of Mezuzah, and we're going to continue a little bit more about that and getting to Tefilin also. So we began this season saying that Chaim Kuntrus sat down in the 60s and he writes an extremely thorough Sefer on Mesuzahs Mezuzah, Mesuzahs Tefilin, and Mesuzahs Tzitzis. So that's what he began. That's why we're talking about some of the things from what he wrote about it. So like this, there's a famous thing everyone knows. In many houses, you walk in the house, the Mezzuzah is you hang it diagonally a little. It's not straight. So the question is, why is that? So, and is there Makairis not to do it like that, so to speak? So there's a Maril. And as we've said already a bunch of times, a lot of our Makairis and Halacha comes from the Maril, the Ramah, as heavily based off him. So it says the Maril and Hilchos Mezuzah. We put it like this. Why? Because there's a machlokes between Rabbenu Tam and Rashi how it should be. Rashi holds it should be straight up. Rabbenu Tam holds it should be Shecheves. So to be Yaitza Shnei Shitois, so the Maril says that that's what we're noyig. We do it somewhere in the middle, like a pshara. And I've heard many a times that it's the dafka in a shalom bayis and a house. It's supposed to remind you when you walk into a house right away. You already see we're making psharas, and this is this is a proper way of shalom bayis. But I don't know how early back that vart goes. Anyway, so the Ramah brings this down, and he says a lashon like this: "V'amadaktikin yoitzin yidei shneim u'menichem oisay b'shipua u'ba'alachsoin." That's what the Ramah says. That's what the Minhag is, and it's coming off to Maril. Fine. Interesting lashon in the Sefer Seder Habrachas, pretty early work. So he says like this after he talks about how you put the mezuzah. He says, "That's Rashi, that's Rabbenu Tam." So he says like this: someone who's very into doing all different hidurim. And what does he do? And he does means say he does Rabbenu Tam Tefilin. Ein mahadar achar beis mezuzah kedas Rashi Rabbenu Tam sheyoytze b'zeh ma shemaniach hamezuzah ba'alachzon. Okay, now we're going to discuss actually today a little bit more about Rashi Rabbenu Tam Tefilin and Chaim Kuntrus. We'll get there soon. L'maisa the Bir Gra Paskins over here like Rashi and says you should do it straight. You don't have to do it on alachzon. This not only is that it's in Bir Gra, it's also in the Maisa Rav, and when you, in the Maisa Rav, the Minhag of the Vilna Gaon, it's already brought down on the page in Yeridei in the Pesach Tshuva that what Mezuzah kaivea b'shaveh v'lo alachsoin, not on an angle. And this is not only in the Maisa Rav. Today we now know that the Maisa Rav, which was first published in the 1830s, it was originally a earlier work from one of the main Talmidim of the Gra, Reb Sadia. So they're also here already in his original listing of the Minhag of the Gra. That's how it sounds like the Gra was noyig not to do it like the Maril / Ramah. Fine. Lamaisa says the Aruch HaShulchan. Sometimes it's very possible. Sometimes doors, especially, that they're not the angle of the door, they're too small. So since Ikar Ladina, you're being Mekayim Rashi and you're not able to do it the alachzon, it's fine. And that is what the And that is what the Aruch HaShulchan says. Okay, now what's the Anhaga of Reb Chaim Kanievsky / or earlier? So as I mentioned already last week, we were zeicha a few weeks ago to get a Sefer called Kuntrus Hachaim, which we'll be referring to more over the next few episodes. So basically is Reb Chaim Kanievsky documented everything he saw or he heard or collected from what he felt is reliable sources on Haggis of the Chazon Ish. So over there in the Sefer Kuntrus Hachaim, it's called. So he brings down what was on Haggah of the Chazon Ish. He also did like Rashi. He says Mezuzah is kava kemat me'umad. Fine. Now here the lashon is kemat me'umad, so it's like a drop. He made it a drop. Says Reb Chaim Kanievsky in his Haggah, and then he refers you to the Piskei Tshuva, where the Piskei Tshuva is bringing down the Maaseh Rav. Okay, the Maaseh, what does Reb Chaim Kanievsky do when he did the Mezuzahs? So we have in his lifetime already came out, we've quoted this in the past, a Sefer called Ella Dalet Amay Shel Halacha B'Levad, a gorgeous book with pictures documenting Reb Chaim Kanievsky all aspects of halacha. And in recent, I think this year, Artzos put it out in a beautiful edition with color pictures. So we have over here in the pictures that they have, Reb Chaim Kanievsky also, that's how he makes sure to do it. It's a drop. When you say it's a drop, so it's not like the Gra where it's mamish, it's mamish like Rashi. It's something in between the Ramah / Maril and the Gra. That was on Hag of the Chazon Ish Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Okay. Interesting. Two more Marmakaimis on this, and we'll move on. So first of all, Chaim Kanievsky Masechtas Mezuzah talks about this. He talks about the Sugya, talks about Rashi, talks about Rabbenu Tam, and as usual, over there he does not let us down. And just to quote two interesting Makairis that I've come across over time. That is like this. There's a Sefer which I've quoted in the past called Minhag of R. So over there they say, Raiv Anshe of Vermaiza, worms, Kaiven Hamzuzais Zekufais. But miktsasam kaiven oisoi ba'alachsoi. Now, then he brings down v'shamati mimoiri hagoyin avbezin shalafnim b'Yisrael, that he remembers shaloi kulam, that no one did it even ba'alachsoi. It was unheard of to do it in worms ba'alachsoi. Now, what's the significance of this? So over here, there's hagoyis on the Minhag of R Chaim, also from early sources. Over here, and says like this. Why not? Because this is the city of who? Rashi. Rashi says it should be Zekufais. Not only that, the base medrash of Rashi at this still was in existence when this Minhag of R Chaim a few hundred years back was written. Okay. Then he says, some people start to do it on a slant. Basically, the proper minhag, so to speak, in worms, the city of Rashi should do it like Rashi. And we find many times already back in the Gemara, there's Hanhaga specifically for a city, because that was so you think in the city of Rashi, they'll do like Rashi. Okay. Fisher Rashi Pasuk Laminu Zechus, Rabbenu Tam is the one that said to do it a different way, and they start to do it. But then he says, he says even though the people start to do it on a slant, for the most part, in worms, when they're writing, when he's working on these Minhag of R Chaim, they did it like Rashi, which was straight up. Okay, and just one marmakim, the times of the Rishonim. What did we find? The Osa Ashkenazi source, a recent manuscript published was a chibur called Mordechai Katoin. So over there he brings down Va'olam nagu kerashi u'me'umad v'chein ikar, and then he says v'chein mashma perakama the kedushin, mashma from a Gemara, because we learn out from Mezuzah me'umad v'chulu, and so over here in this edition, this person brings down some nice markairis about it. Fine. Okay. So anyway, this is one aspect in Hilchos Mezuzah which is known, everyone sees it, and this is what's a little bit behind the Hanhaga, and this is the Hanhaga of specifically Reb Chaim Kanievsky / Chazon Ish. Okay, now there's another famous halacha, and I'm specifically picking light halachas, because as I said already last time, Masechtas Mezuzah is much more complex, and that's why Chaim Kanievsky chose to write a thorough pirish both on the sugyas and on the halacha l'maisa. There was no Mishnah Brura on Yeridea or on this part, so he wrote a Mishnah. We mentioned already in the past. He wrote a Mishnah Brura halacha l'maisa that could work on these halachas. So there's many complex. It's not so simple. It's very complicated, and it's based on many gemaras, and you have to understand the Metzias, and you have to know all different pratim, sai rishonim. So it's a very so. I'm not going to pick complicated topics. I pick specifically lighter ones, the things we're familiar with. So there's another thing. This relates not only, this gets us out of not only Mezuzah, but we said that Chaim Kuntrus writes on Masechtas Tefillin, and that is checking your Tefillin and Mezuzahs. So we know it comes around, and we'll talk a little bit about that, comes around Elul time, Aseres Yemei Tshuva, especially today, Klal Yisrael, many places have the minhag to check the Tefillin, they check the Mezuzah. So what's the story for this? So here we have, this goes back all the way to the Gemara. So in the Gemara in Yuma talks about when one is supposed to check the Mezuzah, and over there it says, Mezuzahs Yachid Nidbekes Pa'amim B'Shavua, V'Shal Rabim Pa'amim B'Yovel. So it's a myodic extreme over here. On one hand, the Yachid is twice a week, and the Rabbim, let's say a shul, if a shul is supposed to have it, that's its own discussion, or base medrash, whatever it is, buildings of Rabbim, then that's twice over a period of 50 years. Amr of Yehuda, the talk says, Ma'isa Martavian, Echad Shaya Baidik Mezuzah B'Shuk, Elyon Shel Tzipari, Matzah Kazler Echa, V'Natul Mena Elv Zuz. So then the Gemara says, V'Amr Abelezer Shluchim Mitzin Nezaken, Hechi de Kabai Hezeka Shani. Okay. Rashi over there says that the chash basically is, and that's what when Elul Rabbi Mishum Sakana basically is that they suspected this person of doing magic. And Rabbenu Chananel also brings down earlier than Rashi when he's mefarish Gemara. So now what's happening is like this, and that in itself also needs clarification. And Reb Chaim Kanievsky over here when he brings that when Masechtas. In Masechtas Mezuzah, where it talks about this Gemara, where it has this brisa, so to speak, about when one's supposed to check the Mezuzahs, he deals with also Rashi, Rabbenu Chananel, Ritva, and everything. And what we see over here is a few points. Number one is that, and this is Kaseder throughout the centuries, especially in the Middle Ages, Jews were always accused of being magicians and stuff. So they didn't understand, and this is going much early. Rashi saying that, and Rabbenu Chananel saying, well, this is going back on the times of the Gemara, for sure. There was many times accusations, they saw strange things the Jews are doing, and they accused them of doing types of magic. So it basically became, you cannot necessarily check your mezuzah because it's going to end up becoming a sakana or you're going to get a great knas. Okay, that's sort of what's going on over here. And as I said already in the past, it's kedai to look at when you learn the sugya in Yuma, more be'iyun, and you look at Reb Chaim Kanievsky, how he sets up the sugya, it's fascinating. Now, going on, specifically about tefillin, so there's a mechilta, and the mechilta says, Magich Adam Tzarech Livdek is at tefillin achas l'shneim asar chaydish, once every 12 months. Okay, then it brings down, it's a machlekes between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai about it, if one has to do it or not. Fine. Now then comes along the Rambam, and the Rambam says, Mezuzahs hayachid nidbekes pamim b'shavua, Mezuzahs Rabbim pamim b'yovel, shama nikra mimeno ois achas, or nimcha kom mimnei shi koivas b'ksalim markeves. Okay. Now, earlier on, the question also is, why is it that the Rabbim's Mezuzah doesn't need to be checked? If there's any problems, why should it be that why should there be a difference between a Yachid and a Rabbim? So there Rashi says a fascinating sentence, and this is a fascinating thing in human nature. And we see that this played out, mamish, in the early halacha of the way the halacha was made, which says like this: Kol davar shusho Rabbim ein la triach alav harbe shim tatriach yi kol echad omer yasu chaveirai. Basically, everyone passes the buck to the next person. So, Mamela, if we're going to make it just the Pashas of the Gemara, where it's so that he's supposed to be checking the Mezuzah so often, and we said that Yovel is for the Mezuzah, the Rabbim, what's going on? So, Rashi gives tremendous insight, which obviously everyone can relate to. Even today, it's very applicable. So, that's with Mezuzah. And that, so now, and so Lamaisa, that's why there's a chiluk between a Yachid and a Rabbim. This fascinating insight into humans. Now, Lamashal, again, referring to this Mordechai Katan, also published a manuscript, he brings down from a medrash. Not only this Mechilta, he brings down from a Tanchuma that Shammai Azakin hayomer mikan shabaydik alma tefillin kol shana v'shana, once a year. V'lo yomer afilu ilu tefillin shenichu liyaba kloimer loy batkam yemais aviv nimtza shein tzarich levaytkam. Again, an extreme. On one hand, one person says to do it yearly. On the other hand, someone says with the tefillin, he didn't even check it. He got it from his father B'Yerusha, and he never checked it. So again, we're seeing extremes over here. Fine. What brought down Shulchan Aruch? So in Hilchos Tefillin we find, Lamashal Hilchos Tefillin, it says, Tefillin shuchzu b'kashris einam tzrichem bedika la'olam. You don't need to check them. V'meinam anichel lefrakim tzrichem bedika pam b'shavua. Again, interesting dilashon. Fine. Okay, here, what's the Makairis for this? So the Bir HaGra has bringing different Makairis from Rishayim, from the Mechilta, from the Yerushalmi, Shtalin to our Rambam, and there's a beautiful Chibur Hameir Laretz who also handles what to make Seder. I just quoted a few different quotes, but there's a lot of quotes. Some of them could be found again by Chaim Kuntrus, and one could see more about the exact quotes because it's what's going on up here. But anyway, moving on says the Magen Avram that you should about tefillin, even though tefillin that you wear daily, it says ein tzrichim b'dika la'olam miu nachain levaytkam, because it gets ruined from sweat. This is from where? It's based on the Knesset Gdaila, which was a strong makar for the Magen Avram many times. Fine. Says the Magen Gibayrim, this is the work written by the Shalom Meshiv and his brother-in-law. So he says like this: tefillin. Again, he's talking about tefillin. He says miu yesh lahachmir ulevaytkam. Ukfar here habeish. Baruch Shamar. There's two Baruch Shamar. So in one of them it says Shabbat Kama v'Kama Tefillin, and he opened them up and he found. And now here he says something not like the Magen Avram. He says that the Mamish, the Oisius were problematic. Then he brings down the Chein Heid HaKnesset Gdaila. Now the Knesset Gdaila, as we just saw from the Magen Avram, is the Altzazea. So there's two reasons going on over here. That says the Magen Gibarim Al Pishnai Medim Yakum Davar the Vadi Yeshazar Levatim Chol Pam. Fine, and and this is the ha'ira of the Magen Gibarim, that the Shalom Meshiv, that one should check it. Now, when to check it and how often, even though we're seeing now, because as I said, the Shulchan Aruch is saying that tefillin, which we saw already, goes back possibly from Beis Hillel, that he didn't check it. So we're seeing that there is a musig of checking it. Again, here, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Masechtas Tefillin, deals with it. He deals with this Baruch Shamar. He has a piece of ha'ara from his father about it. Okay. Says the Aruch HaShulchan when he talks about this in Hilchos Tefillin, Bizmanenu Yadua Shadiyoi Shalanu Behemeshech Eze Shanim gets messed up, and therefore he says, Medina Tzrichim Levdaikosam Be'ezezman V'chein Yesh. But he doesn't say when. It's still up in the air, but he says there's something to do with the diyai. The ink is different. Now, it could be the ink in the olden days was much more powerful, and maybe that's Pshat and Beis Hillel / Ad Shulchan Aruch, where we see that not necessarily one has to check. Okay, what about Mezuzahs? So there, the Aruch HaShulchan says something else. He says like this. He brings the Gemara and Yuma, and he brings Rashi, and then he says, in certain places where the mezuzah is kept, where it could get wet, with his lachluchas, yesh livdai tadir lechala pachas pam b'shana v'chein ani noyeg, that he checked the mezuzahs once a year. You have to check all of them. Okay, so we have over here that the Aruch HaShulchan saying that that there's something about the mezuzah and what we could explain simply is it's especially they're outside in a lot of places, especially the way where the mezuzahs are, so it needs to be checked. Okay, we have a Sefer which we quoted already previously, Reb Shmuel Abuav as a Sefer Techeiles, which is a sort of musar / halachic work, and about different areas that he feels people should be, that people needed to be aware of that they weren't. And he says like this, when he talks about different aspects of tefillin and mezuzah, he says like this: Kifi adin livdai kol mezuzah beis pam b'sheva shanim. Here, this is a key thing, and that already there's takon nuschais earlier on, and I'm not going to list out all the nuschais. It's not twice a week. That's a little too much, but it's twice every 7 years. Why? Because again, similar to what I said with Aruch HaShulchan, and that's what Aruch HaShulchan is saying it once a year. Okay, so we see already earlier. This is a Sefer Techeiles, Shmuel Abuav. This is going back to it's actually, we don't even know the exact date, but it's estimated to be between the 1630s and 1650s. Fine. Another chibur which I've quoted many times from Frankfurt on the Bezdin of the Shalah. So the Yosef Eimitz, he writes, "Pamayim b'shmita tzarich livdoik achar mezuzahs." But if you know that the ICs are going to get messed up, then you should do it once every 3.5 years. Now, obviously, the question is, what do you mean? How do you know? You have to check. Okay, Lamaisa, in one of the Maduras of the Yosef Eimitz, there's a Aris from a Ramesha Mintz, who was a Yid in Frankfurt, and he says, what was Lamaisa, the Minhag in Frankfurt? They checked it and this is to be able to remember for them, they used to check it in Adar Sheni. Okay? Now, in this Ha'ara, even though Mechon Shalavim put out a beautiful edition of the Yosef Eimitz, for some reason this tiny little Ha'ara got lost. And they didn't put it into there, although they made major improvements to the Yosef Eimitz. Okay. What about the Chazon Ish? Do we know anything about the Chazon Ish and checking mezuzahs and stuff like that? So we do. That is, we have a chibur from one of the people that was known to be very close to the Chazon Ish, Reb Shraga Feivel Steinberg. So he his family put out a book a few years ago called Ma'aseh Chazon Ish. He's very, in many of the crazy amount of literature of the Chazon Ish, he's always quoted a different Haggis. So he says like this, Rabbenu atzmai hayamakmen ma'oid abadikas hamezuzahs. And then he says like this, ube'erech kol chatzi shana, he would give it to me to check. Especially the mezuzahs that were outside because of the rain. And he would basically, the Chazon Ish was very concerned about checking it, even as I'm saying now, even not just even once a year, even more once every 6 months. Fine. Lamaisa, what's the minhag in Klal Yisrael? So we know, and this is brought down, Lamashal, in the work of Klal Yisrael for the Hilchos Yom Neraim, the Mata Ephraim, and the Mamish in the beginning of Hilchos Yom Neraim, and Simon Tav Kuf Pei Aleph, he says, Yesh Anshi Ma'isa Noigen Shebechodesh Hazeh, they're checking the Dikduke Mitzvahs Li's Beidik U'Beichen Tefilin Mezuzah Shalahem V'Kol Hashim Tzesham Badik V'Shar Mitzvahs V'U Minhag Toif. And he says it's a Minhag Toif. So this is how the Minhag becomes very popular, but Lamaisa, others also bring down this Minhag. Just to mention, Rabbi Eliezer Fleckless, the Rav of Prague, Talmud Muvak of the Noam Yehuda, Ben Daira of the Rebbe Chaim Zalman, also in his drushes encourages. And we have, even earlier, a drush Sefer that was a little from this in the 1760s. It's first published. We quoted it on the episode about LeDavid. It's a fascinating drush sefer because in the drushes of this person, we get to see a glimpse of a lot of the different hanhagas that were going on in Europe at the time. He was a Meirdik Darshan, and he gave many practical examples throughout his drushes. So here he talks about, he says like this, Vihine, he says, Basi lahazir lahidia, shebechodesh Elul, you should make sure to check your mezuzahs. And then he writes barichos about this, and he says why. And he says stuff it could get makulkal, which is what we see in all these different places. And then he says like this: Kasher be'enai ra'isi kama v'kama pa'amim shabadakti mezuzahs u'matzatzi harba teva she'ein nikud tzurasan v'teva al teva yachtav yidburku k'moshe badak shabliti ef shalas pir ben advakim v'avim plili ligroi mezuzahs ashetia mitzvah b'zuyolav kol kach noichloi shlo yikva m'shiyikva v'lo yizer b'zeh. And not only that, we know it's often a gemara b'avoin mezuzah banim meisim k'shem ketanim. So we see it's a Merdika Chamerdika thing, and Bekitzer, he says he encouraged strongly that to make sure to check the mezuzahs in this month of El. So this is already going back to this minhag is making it to El. Okay, but the bottom line is, from all these makayos that we've seen up till now, it's a common minhag to check the mezuzahs. Okay, now two last pratim with this. Some people are not so makbid about this. Is there any Limud Zechus for that? So Sam, just to throw out there's a very nice write-up about this from Reb Daniel Neustadt in his beautiful work called The Monthly Halachic Discussion. So he talks about Bechlal about this. And it turns out there are two makairis that one could find that we could see to be makel. Again, not that someone should be makel, but these are tremendous, as we'll see in a moment, like this. First, Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. So we mentioned there's a work of Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach called Halicha Shloima, beautiful works on Tefillah in the volume on Tefillah, the first volume, page Nun Tes. It says like this: Ein noyagin luftoik es at Tefillin nase bizmanenu behidur, l'loy siba miyuchedes. Says Reb Shlomo Zalman, there's no reason to check your tefillin. Today is different than in earlier days. Especially people spent a lot of money when you get your tefillin, so then you don't have to check it. Then what about Mezuzahs? He says also the same thing. Why? Because we put it in Kli Zechus, and so it's. And he says, so we have over here the great Paisik of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach saying differently than all the Mahalach that I was saying up till now from all the different Makairs. Okay. The question is there what's behind it, and is there any earlier Paiskim that say like this? So looking around, there is one interesting Maramakim. There's a Shulchan Gavaya, incredible Sefer on R Chaim and on Yeridea, from Ramochai. So over there, so in Siman Reish Tzadik Aleph, he talks about where in Siman Reish Tzadik Aleph is the halachas of checking the Mezuzah twice every 7 years. So he says over there, and that will give us the insight. It's not that if you look in the sugya, the concern is because maybe it got ruined, maybe it got stolen, all these things. However, once mezuzahs were put in, as Rav Shlomo Zalman says, in a shayfer or in a glass container, and then he brings a whole bunch of makairis about it, then there's no longer the chashash. It's not going to get ruined from the rain, and there's no reason to constantly check the mezuzahs. And as a matter of fact, we saw, let's say for tefillin, we see that even the olden days, the Beis Hillel, or depending on the Nuschais and the Mechilta and others, that he didn't check it at all. Now, what's the story behind this? What's the story behind this? So just very briefly, and this is something we spoke about in the last episode, and I just want to just tighten what I said in the last episode and just bring it out here a little clearer for 1 or 2 minutes. And that is like this. When you learn through Hilchos Mezuzah and the Gemaras, you come across some interesting L'shainis. L'mashal, they put them, and to the way I brought it out was I started backwards. We handled about kissing the mezuzah. So Rabbi Akiva says, no, you shouldn't kiss the mezuzah. What do you mean you shouldn't kiss the mezuzah? Because you're touching something, and it's usher to touch a mezuzah if it's not covered. And because we said in Hilchos Yadayim, it's the tumah based on the sugyas in R Chaim Siman Kuf Mem Zayin. So, or similarly, we said the Gra said that you can't wrap it in anything. So we spoke out already last time that different people handle the Gra, and the Chazon Ish Chaim Kuntrus brings down from the Chazon Ish that he doesn't believe the Gra said it, and all different makayos about it. And interestingly enough, I came across Rabbi Zechariah Stern in the newly published Tshuvas of his on Yeridea from manuscript. He also has a Tshuva handling the Gra. But what's going on over here? Rabbi Akiva Eiger and the Gra, what are they talking about? How did they put the mezuzahs? So I spoke out last week already from Rishayim and onwards. They used to put it in cases, the shayfarais, and there's numerous makayos to such a thing. It's going down from the Rambam, many Rishayim, and they put it in cases, and there was reasons for putting the cases. I spoke out with the Taz, I spoke out with the Bach. So what's going on? When you look in, and so the answer is like this: when you look in the Gemaras, there's some very weird things. It talks about putting a mezuzah on a stick or putting it behind the door. Well, I understand, what's the big deal? Just do it right. Why was everyone looking for chachmas how to not do the mezuzah properly? So the answer is, and what lies is like this: throughout Klal Yisrael's history, many times there were gzeiros, and the gzeiros caused that they were not able to do the mezuzahs properly. So they tried to come up with chaps how to do it, and this we pointed out based on Rufa Margolis and other makayos, that even if they couldn't do it, l'chol pachos, there should be some type of remembrance about it. So Lamashal, the Shailum Meshiv, in his work on Yeridea, Yad Shol, so he handles this Nakuda, and he says like this: what's pshat? Specifically what I'm talking about, he says, because the goof of the gzeiros, they were trying to hide it from them. Then he brings down a beautiful maramakim from the Beis Hillel in Siman Reish Pei Beis, and this is a ha'ara. If you look up in the Beis Hillel, it's the son of the Beis Hillel who published it, Shar Hamburg, that the Anusim, that they would still do, that they did mitzvahs, they still did mitzvahs, they hid the mitzvahs because I guess they were still scared of the Inquisition, stuff like that. What do? They had small Sefer Torah, and mezuzahs, and they used to walk around having them as necklaces. So what's the nakud over here? The answer is, and we see from the Shalomation and everything, and that's the pshat in these gemaras, that Klal Yisrael many times they did not have the mezuzahs were either not wrapped as Rabbi Kiva and the Gra, but even if you don't go with that, many times they weren't in such proper places, and that's why it needs to be. So now at a certain point in time, it came straight up. The halacha is you put it in a shayfer, you put it in a case. So if you did that, says Rav Shlomo Zalman, let's say today, so there's no reason to run and check it. There's no real chashashis. But it seems from the Paiskim that they still were with the Lamashal Darach HaShulchan. He's chayshish that still it could still get in. So we have all I'm trying to do is that to explain some of the background behind Rav Shlomo Zalman and the Shulchan Gavay's Psak, because it goes into how the mezuzahs were done throughout the ages, and that could be why they're makel. Okay, anyway, there's a lot to say about it, but we're just moving on. So now we get to Masechtas Tzitzis. Reb Chaim Kanievsky writes, this is where actually he begins his Perushim in the 60s on Masechtas Tzitzis, and this Perush is much smaller. So, of course, when you go through it already, even though he's in his low 30s, you get to see Reb Chaim Kanievsky in the full glory with the incredible Bakiyas that we get to know that he becomes famous for, but already here he's ganz famous about. So just to point out one nakuda now, and the Mirza Hashem next time we'll do a different nakuda relating to tzitzis of his, is like this. What about Techeiles? So I am definitely not going down the rabbit hole of Techeiles, but just to say 2-3 ideas about this. It says like this. The end of Masechtas Tzitzis, it says, okay, so it talks about Techeiles. So over here, Chaim Kanievsky, in the earlier pieces, okay, so here Chaim Kanievsky, what does he do? He has 2 pages where he discusses some aspects of Techeiles with Kedarka B'Kodesh, his incredible Bakiyas, the Toseftas and the Medrash, and the Rambam and what's going on with it. Fine. And he shows Chaim Kanievsky was up on the raid already then. He quotes the Raziner Svarim twice over here, and in his Sefer on Rambam, in the Kiryat Melech over here, he also manages to throw out, he was aware of the Diyunim and the Shailas about Techeiles, and he quotes them. Fine. Lamaisa, what was the Shita of the Chazon Ish? Do we know about Techeiles, what the Chazon Ish held? So in the Maisa Ish, they have a whole interesting piece about it. We'll go in order over here, and that is like this. Again, referring to the Sefer Zechronis of where Reb Chaim Kanievsky is bringing down different things that he heard from reliable sources about the Chazon Ish. So he says like this. They asked the Chazon Ish, what about Techeiles? So he says like this. So someone asked him if it doesn't help. And this is a famous thing that many people ask. What do I lose to do it? So says the Chazon Ish. There was someone that wore glasses without lenses. He says there's no such thing. You don't do such a thing. You're accomplishing nothing. It's not that by doing it you're accomplishing something. That was the Chazon Ish's answer, and this is what Chaim Kanievsky records in the Sefer Zechronis. Now, in the Maisa Ish, they bring that in Chelik Aleph that someone had a whole conversation with him about it, and he said, Lamashal, he said that it's a Yachid v'Rabim halacha k'Rabim. Most people paskin not like the Radziner. That was at that time, but this answer that's in the Kuntrus Zechronis sounds like this is going on possibly on another discovery of Techeiles. I'm not sure because it says it was Manenu. But anyway, then over two other ideas is like this. It says they bring down one other aspect is that there was a pulmus earlier on about if you could bring someone wanted to reinstitute Ritzi Kalisher. It's a whole tumult about being makar karbanis, a carbon pesach b'zmanazeh. So they handled. One of the tightness over there was, says the Chazon Ish, was you need big dekuna and we don't have Techeiles. So what? So he says like this. What do you mean? We could have had Techeiles from this. So the Chazon Ish was bringing a raya from that pulmus already. We see that they didn't hold that there's any eitzes with Techeiles. Okay, Lamaisa Rebel Yashiv is famous in also deals with this, and we're talking about the Shver of Rebel Yashiv. Sorry, of Chaim Kanievsky. So just a quote in his Kavitz Chuvas, he has in the Simon Bays. He was also asked by Rafael Cohn of America about it, and again the same thing. You lose out by doing it. So he talks about it, and he says, "Mamish similar to the Chazon Ish. Gedolei Yisrael b'dorei lo yaskimu imay." Then he says, "V'hinei kaver yom v'shanim bo chaykru mebatlu as dvarim mikol v'kol el etzbiu heim al mashu acher shu achilazim shuv acher tkufa yoser mecheres kama anshi mada v'tonu shekol mashu chazu akai shav v'tafel hu v'rak heim hayodim makim v'sachazim amiti v'anachnu lo yneidem lo kaver shalim yover acher v'yivatlu gam devrim." Basically, it constantly gets changed. So there's the Rebbe Yash is not into it. Then he brings down the famous Taina of the Beis Halevi about it with Messiah. Okay. So Rebbe Yashiv also has it, and Rebbe Yashiv also has some other tshuvas relating to Techeiles. Okay, I'm just throwing this out there because as I said, the ending of Masechtas Tzitzis has two passages relating to Techeiles, and Chaim Kanievsky deals with the sugyas of Techeiles a little bit over there. He devotes 2 pages to it. Okay, one other idea over here is, I'm still looking, who uses Masechtas Tzitzis? Who uses these chiburim, so to speak? So we, in the first episode I already mentioned, Rishayim do. So I come across a Bir Hagra in Siman Chaf Gimel in Shulchan Aruch, R Chaim, and I was all excited that maybe somehow, even though he knew of the Masechtas, as I told you, I said in the first episode, the conversation with him, which Avram ben Agra has with his father and records about what the Shavuot Masechtas are. So I thought, I found a piece where the Bir Hagra is quoting Masechtas Tzitzis, but it turns out it's not true. What happens like this? So the Bir Hagra on Siman Chaf Gimel, it brings down. He brings down something from Masechtas Tzitzis. So I was like, Gevaldik, he's bringing it down. But then it turns out that 2 Sifim earlier, he brings down Tyrus Ha'adam from the Ramban. And that's where one of the earliest Makairis that we have for Masechtas Tzitzis is from this Tyrus Ha'adam. So it's not that the Gra, so it means if someone sees this isolated Gra, they might think that what happens is the Gra knew about Masechtas Tzitzis. The answer is he did not. He knew that there exists Masechtas Tzitzis, but as I explained in the first episode, it wasn't out in his time. Okay, anyway, that's relating to the Gra. And now just 2 more ideas to close, 3 more quick ideas. Number 1. Hilchos Tefilin. So Reb Chaim Kanievsky, as we're discussing over there, he writes this massive Persian Hilchos Tefilin. So we spoke already about checking your Tefilin, and we referred to different things that he talks about that. Now, in here, there's a famous Kuntrus of his, which is known as the Kuntrus Iter Yad. What is the din of a lefty? So for lefties and Tefillin, this is a big sugya, and many lefties, they end up giving a bar mitzvah shetel on the sugyas of lefties. It's famous, pretty famous. Reb Chaim Kanievsky wrote a kuntrus about lefties. His father, the Stipler, was a lefty, and it seems one of the times he wanted to give him something from the Shalach Manas, he wrote a kuntrus about lefties. He publishes this kuntrus in Masechtas Tefillin when it talks about lefties with Tefillin. So first, Reb Chaim Kanievsky has a page or 2 where he discusses the sugyas and mamish what he takes out from all the research that he did to make up the klalim of Hilchos Lefties. And then Reb Chaim Kanievsky has this kuntrus, it's not so big, it's about 4 pages, and he basically goes through 88 different areas from a velt of Makairis. What's the din with a lefty with this? What's the din with, let's say, putting on your shoes? What does lefty do? Tefillin, taking off the tefillin. But he goes through many other areas that are not relating to Archaim. L'mashal Mezuzah. So Mezuzah, in his Hilchos Mezuzah, he has whole arichos about that, which we're not going to go into. A get, kedushin, all these different things. Reb Chaim Kanievsky collects information that he located from his tremendous bakiyas in halacha over here, literally piece by piece. And this has become, I imagine, one of these days someone's going to put out a fancy edition of this kuntrus barichos. Just, of course, since we're talking about Chaim Kanievsky, so he talks about lamashal kinin chalipin. So there he throws you out of Targum Rus. When he talks about, he brings something else from Targum Yonason about Smicha and Karbana. He said he has some other a typical Chaim Kanievsky type of bakiyas. Okay, and two other ideas. What this is, it seems that maybe there was a possibility someone wanted to publish it separately. So the Stipler encouraged him not to. He said people are not going to end up buying Masechtas Tefillin if they just publish it separately. I think I saw that in one of the places, and one other places, but Tefillin, he's not so ma'irich about what halacha Tefillin. That is the Baal Archas Rabbenu, the chavrusa of the Stipler, Rabbi Avraham Levi Horowitz. He puts out a massive work just mostly dealing with Tefillin. Mamish, a 200-page sefer going from the sugyas, checking up every rishon, similar to what he did with Hilchos Yichud. He has a beautiful haskama from Rechatzka Abramsky, from the Stipler Kiyadua, and from his brother-in-law, Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, where he deals with the sugya. And of course, today, it's for some reason, I know that a few times I've tried to go locate the sefer, it's very hard to find. It goes out of print. So it's interesting. Such an exotic topic, it's still common enough in the Jewish world, and people are aware of this sefer, so it sells from time to time. Okay. Now, just to mention the last two yediyas over here is like this. What about Tefillin de Rabbeinu Tam? So we know that one of the machlokes, famous machlokes, Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam about Tefillin is Tali in the Seder Parshas. So early on already, there's different Neschais in different places, from the Gemara, from Mechilta, all different places, passed like Rashi, passed like Rabbeinu Tam. So again, in Masechtas Tefillin, Chaim Kuntrus shows, look over here, and you see about Rashi Rabbeinu Tam. So I was wondering the following question. Do we know anything about Reb Chaim Kanievsky, about Tefillin Rabbeinu Tam, or the Stipler, or the Chazon Ish? Okay, so this is what I decide to go look, and I find like this. The Stipler, according to Artzos Rabbenu, who we just spoke about, he, it seems, did at a certain point in time start wearing Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin, but not in shul, and not openly. And he has a whole page in Artzos Rabbenu already, volume 1, about the Chazon Ish, about the Stiplers and Haggis with wearing Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin. What about the Chazon Ish? So again, I refer now to the Sefer Zechronis. Sefer Zechronis brings down over here. Hold on. He did not wear Rabbeinu Tam. Says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Ein Keser Rosh Siman Yud Gimel v'Yadal. And this leads us to, we're not going to go into discussion barichas about Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin, but Kiyadua, the Gra, did not wear Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin. He said, if I end up having to do Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin, there's many other shitas, and I would have to be wearing many pairs of tefillin. The famous Gra, quoted in Keser Rosh from Chaim Balazhner, everyone knows this. So here we see something interesting. We have, on one hand, the Hanag of the Gra, the Stipler, who we don't know so much mamish into being into the Gra, but the Chazon Ish more so, and therefore the Chazon Ish's Hanagataka was not to wear Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin. So now, what does Reb Chaim Kanievsky do? That is the $1 million question. So here, it turns out that he does not wear Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin, and that is, and one could find this again in this beautiful picture book of Reb Chaim Kanievsky already. They talk about the Mechaber, I think it was maybe a grandson of his. He says he wore it once. He put on Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin once. Why? Because he says, they say from the Chafetz Chaim, they're going to ask him when he go up why he didn't wear Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin. So he says, L'chol Bachas, I put it on once. But he says his father, at a certain point in time, someone gave him as a gift. So his father did wear it. Then he asks, but isn't there many Rishainim and all different things about it? And he tells too, again, this Keser Rosh, which is what Reb Chaim Kanievsky writes, is possibly the reason behind the Chazon Ish not wearing it. Once we're talking about Anhag of Tefillin Rabbeinu Tam, and getting to the Gra, and the Ma'aseh Chazon Ish and the Stipler, and Reb Chaim Kanievsky, we will conclude with one more minhag. What about wearing tefillin the whole day? So we know many Gedolim wore tefillin the whole day. Pashtus, the whole halacha, the original din was to wear tefillin the whole day. This is a whole shiur or 2 shiurim at least to discuss tefillin throughout the ages when it switched. But in all the pictures of Reb Chaim Kanievsky, one does not see him wearing tefillin the whole day. Chazon Ish, Stipler, they did not. They were not of the camp of wearing tefillin the whole day, but interestingly enough, the Gra did wear tefillin the whole day. So why certain things they didn't, someone, I'm sure one day will write up a whole thing, which Anhagas and why certain Anhagas the Chazon Ish take on like the Gra, certain are not. But tefillin, so in Reb Chaim Kanievsky's Perish Masechtas Tefillin, he does talk about wearing tefillin the whole day, and now to some rayas about it, but not barichas, even though something that I was hoping that he would talk about barichas, but he has a few times, he says some interesting ideas about it. To conclude about Masechtas Tefillin, one last idea is that he quotes throughout Masechtas Tefillin and also Masechtas Tzitzis, the Artzos Hachaim. The Artzos Chaim, what's the Artzos Chaim? The Artzos Chaim is one of the most incredible works on Shulchan Aruch R Chaim from the Malbim. But sadly, we don't have it on all of Shulchan Aruch. Where do we have it till? It goes till Siman Lamed Beis, I think it is. So Chaim, some Siman Lamed Aleph it ends with Siman Lamed Aleph. Anyway, Chaim Kanievsky brings a Keseder throughout the Sefer of his many times. Kiyadua, the Chazon Ish was very, very into the Sefer. Lamashal, I've seen this quoted a few times, but again, referring to this, I quoted earlier, Rav Shraga Feivel Steinberg. So I think he might be even the source of it in the various places that I've seen it. But he says like this: the Chazon Ish said that the Artzos Chaim is like the Ktsois on R Chaim. And he, in a different place I saw, the Chazon Ish said when it came out that Mamash made a mapecha in the world. But the fact is, it only is 31 simanim. L'maisa, it's first published in 1837. The second volume is published in 1860, and we never was zeicha for it. Why not? So the story goes. Mirz Hashem, I will try to deal with this in a future episode where I'm dealing with the Mishnah Berurah and the Aruch HaShulchan, because ki yadua, if someone learns Mishnah Berurah until Siman Lamed Aleph, the Artzos Chaim is quoted millions of times, and the Aruch HaShulchan also quotes a nice amount of times. This is an incredible Sefer. The Malbim doesn't need any askamas. Everyone knows about him as being the Malbim, but less known is about this work, the Artzos Chaim, which, as I said, Chaim Kuntrus was very into, the Chazon Ish was very into, and it has incredible askamas aside from the Chassam Sefer, other Gedolei Olam at the time, which needs to be dealt with, discussed, and to discuss the method of it. But when I say that it's an incredible Sefer, is literally he had everything. He thought of everything. Mamish kol tag shvetag kol Torah kula was at his fingertips, and he used it while discussing all the different aspects in our Chaim. So Chaim Kanievsky, Verstetzach, is going to like the Sefer, especially as I'm saying that the Chazon Ish wasn't. He even in the Sefer Svarim that the Stipler had also an interesting story about it, which was that someone told him that someone went to ask the Chafetz Chaim a question. As I just said, the Chafetz Chaim had the Sefer. So he says the Chafetz Chaim got up to Svarim Shank, took out the Artzos Chaim, and he showed him what it says. And then he says, the Chafetz Chaim wrote in his thing, where did I get this Artzos Chaim from the Malbim? So it's a fascinating nakuda, and Chaim Kuntrus got a kick out of that story. Okay, fine. And as I said, he has different ha'aros about him. So just to say one last sentence about this, in one of the places when he talks about, he has a saga on the Malbim based on Mechilta the Rajbi, but he says it's not a problem, don't worry about it. Loi ra brisa didan, he didn't see Masechtas Tefilin, Veloi Mechilta the Rashbi, Shadain loi nitplasu biyamav, and therefore he said what he said. But if he would have seen what the data that I have, says Chaim Kuntrus, he would have said differently. And okay, that's enough for right now with Masechtas Tefilin. And Mirz Hashem, the next episode we'll discuss a few more aspects, and we'll move on to the next topics.
Amazing. Thank you very, very much. Wow, kept it under 50 minutes for those who are watching the clock, and we appreciate it, and looking forward to being back for episode 4 of season 3. Once again, questions, comments, suggestions, always greatly appreciated. Send to me, shweidm@ou.org, and or Rab Eliezer Brut@gmail.com.